and stuff. So, welcome, Chris, to Stage 20.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. And after this great session in the morning, we're having now an interview for the newsletter, Stage 20 newsletter. I'll have 4 questions for you,
Okay.
and we can have like 15-20 minutes to talk about them.
Cool.
Okay. So first of all, I'd like to ask you, for our viewers, who are you, what do you do, and where?
Okay, who am I? I am Chris Pitsiokos. I make music in a variety of formats, I would say all existing under the umbrella of experimentalism in some way or another. Primarily, I'm a saxophonist and composer. However, I also use other instruments. Like I mentioned in the session earlier today, when I approach collaboration with others, I try to interrogate the typical hierarchical structure of composer-performer when I work. And where all over the world, basically, I don't know, no, that's not true, but as much as I can, primarily, I live in Berlin right now. I spent most of my life in New York so far, and I travel quite a lot to perform, mostly around Europe, North America, but also in other places, Japan. In this fall, I have a tour in Japan, Malaysia, Korea, I think elsewhere in Asia. So I'm getting out there, getting around. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. So maybe I know you've mentioned this before already, maybe you could talk a little bit more about what is the focus of your research?
Yeah, it's eclectic, I would say. As I mentioned earlier, I'm interested in kind of, I would call non-hierarchical practices of music making. And my approach to that has in the past been creating what I and others call open form scores, which allow performers to collaboratively generate structure in real time, in addition to the content of what they're playing. Also, I play a lot of improvised music, freely improvised music, I should say, which inherently is non-hierarchical insofar as there is no leader, and we just come together and make music together. Apart from that, lately I've been focusing on rhythms that are generated by irrational numbers as opposed to normal ratios, which is how we typically conceptualize rhythm. Subjective listening, which involves not only the subjectivity of the person's psychological experience, but what I'm referring to in this case is literally where somebody in the room is standing or how they're turning their head, changing what they hear. So for instance, when you have spatialized audio and you deal with polarity shifting or other similar phenomenon or beating patterns or standing waves, these are all technical terms that, I don't know, not everybody knows, but basically they all create phenomena that when you walk around the room, it actually changes what you're hearing pretty dramatically. So I'm interested in that as well. And
Cool. So obviously Sage Vint is very interested in studying interdisciplinarity in itself. So here's the next question, which is a very expected one, which is, how is your research interdisciplinary?
Well, yeah, I already touched on it, but basically I'm interested in how societal structures, political structures, inform the type of music that we make, and how we can use music to interrogate those structures. Yeah, for starters, I guess that's the primary way in which what I do is interdisciplinary. I mean, I also deal with acoustic phenomena that, I have to have some kind of understanding of acoustics and physics and math, but pretty rudimentary. So, yeah, because those are the two main ways.
I guess, I don't know if you would like to also extend your answer in a way, not only to explain what are the multidisciplinary aspects or interdisciplinary aspects of your research, or how carrying out your research involves dealing with interdisciplinary itself.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, I'm a musician, and that's what I do, and that's my form of expression. I do work with sort of, if you want to talk about more traditional modes of what interdisciplinary means, I mean, I do sometimes work with installation, and I work with filmmakers, and I stuff like that, but somehow that's not that interesting for me to talk about. But what is interesting more is how music inherently is thinking about how music inherently exists in society and can affect things outside of itself, and how there's this dynamic relationship between society, political structures, music. I mean, art is inherently in dialogue with all sorts of stuff, and I'm not really sure if what I do is that unique in that regard, because I think that all art has that in common, ideally at least. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that was a great addition to that answer. So the last question is, are there any perspectives on the present and future that you would like to share with us in the context of your research?
Yeah, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but yeah, I'm interested in how experimental music, let's say non-commercial music more broadly, music that isn't there to sell and also isn't there to just like exist as a background, can regain some kind of political or societal function outside of the usual spheres of its existence. That's something I hope to see more of in the future, I suppose, because it's very easy for this music to exist, kind of in a bubble in academia and in these arts institutions around the world. And I'm curious to see how it can gain relevance outside of that. I mean, the technical aspects of what I do are I hope interesting in and of themselves, but I actually want them to also exist outside of the research domain and have some larger political and societal relevance. And I think that's something that experimental musicians and researchers can think about more than they already do. Or I don't know, probably there are researchers who think about that a lot, but
Right, thank you so much for your answer.